Hello, everybody. I'm Jackie K. Cooper, and I'm telling you, I'm just having all kind of luck lately, getting people that I want to talk to agree to come on and talk to me. And today it's Phyllis Clark Nichols. Phyllis, welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you so much, Jackie. I have been anticipating this day since the invitation, although I feel like I've had lots of conversation with you along the way somewhere.
But it is the funniest thing because this is the closest that we've come to meeting in person. But I think I told you off camera. I told somebody the other day, I feel like I've known Phyllis since I was in grammar school or whatever. I don't know. It was just an instant click with a friendship. And I will give credit to our friends Gary and Linda Bishop. They're from your hometown, and I've gone blank on the town, so help me there.
A little town in the very southern part of the state called Cairo.
Cairo, Cairo, I say
Yes,
Cicero.
I grew up there with Gary and Linda and their siblings and their families. In fact, Linda's father delivered me.
Oh my
And
gosh, I didn't know that.
yes, in the middle of a September hurricane.
Now, you're a September baby?
I am.
What date?
Eighth.
Mine's the 13th.
Oh my goodness.
They were we
I
keep
tell you.
finding these things, I'm telling you. But I remember so well that Gary Bishop came up to me one day in Sunday school because of the same church, and he said, Jackie, I've got this woman who writes books, and you have got to read them. And I thought, what in the world is he talking about? And he said, seriously, he said, she's written all these books and they're so good. And I've been reading every one she writes, and you just need to read them. And so I think I contacted you, and
You
you
did.
sent me you said like five. I think I was like, I came in late to the party on the long views, what is long series,
Rockwater series.
Rockwater. I'm
The
saying
Rockwater series.
Rockwater series. And there have been a total of how many in the Rockwater series now?
Six of those books
Okay.
and
Well,
one percolating.
okay. That's good to hear because that was one of the questions I was going to ask you is I'm caught up in it, but I will get back to that one percolating. I'm going to remember that. But I think I sat down and read those books straight through. I mean, the first one was so good, and then the second one was there, and the third one was there, and I just read. And my wife, Terry, she just devoured them. She just loved them. And to this day, when I got your latest independent novel, Christmas at Bar Haven, I think we opened it on Mailbag Monday, and then later I asked Terry, I said, "Where's Phyllis's book? It's upstairs. I'm gonna read it." So
Music to my ears, Jackie.
seriously, she loves it. I love them, and because you write stories, I've told you this, and especially with Christmas at Bar Haven, I got this. You write stories that give us hope, hope in humanity, and bad things happen, good things happen, but overall, there's a strain of hope. And I thank you for that.
Well, I hope so, Jackie. And before I speak to that, I do want to say that I congratulate you on the wisdom of winter. My husband and I read every morning. We have our devotional time together and then a quiet time separate. But we read that for about a month. We'd read a chapter every day. And it was like sitting down and sharing a cup of coffee with my friend Jackie K. Cooper. And every day we'd marvel at what memories it would bring to us and what little nuggets of wisdom and truth and hope that you bring to us in your writing. So I congratulate you for that.
You are so sweet. Thank you so much. But this is about you, not about me.
Well, okay. Um,
But
I
I want to know, uh,
okay.
hold that thought, but I've got so many thoughts in my head, and I know we can't go on forever, but you are a musician, You are a composer. You are a writer. You are a speaker. How did you ever, what did you do with all those talents? I mean, I know people who are good writers. I know people who can play the piano and different musical instruments. I know people who can compose music. I know people who are good public speakers. But I think you're the first person I've met who's just all of that.
Well, you're kind. I think it just comes from the creative nature. Um, I grew up, as you know, in South Georgia, and I was an asthmatic child, which meant that I couldn't run and play and be outside like other children. And on top of that, I was really, really small. So I found my home on the piano stool and in the books that I read. I could do things and go places and meet people through those books. And it just gave me like you have, a love of books. And I always wanted to write one. And this kind of leads me back to where I was going just a minute ago. You know, I came to the writing life very late in my life.
Me too.
Uh, yes. And I often pondered, you know, why did I have to wait so long to write that book that I really wanted to write? And a very wise fellow told me, Phyllis, you needed to suffer a bit along the way to have something to say. And I think that's true. But my writing mentor uh, was Dr. Abraham Verghese. You may recognize his name as the author of The Covenant of Water, which was Oprah's pick this
And
year.
it's
And
still on
it's,
the bestseller list.
oh, yes. And it's just this incredible piece of art and literature. But in speaking with Abraham one day, we were talking about books and writing, and I told him, I said, you know, I want to write a book, but I don't know if I can. He said, if you have a book in you, write it, Phyllis. And he wanted to know what kind of books I wanted to write. And I told him, I said, I want books that bring people some hope and some light. And he said, well, you got to have some darkness. I said, well, sure. But if I cannot write a book that doesn't bring people some hope, ordinary people like me, some hope and some light, then I'm just going to go fishing. I don't want to write books that only talk about darkness. There's enough of that in the world.
Absolutely. All right. So you got inspiration from him. He was your mentor. You knew what you wanted to write. What was the first book you wrote? Or or do you have an unpublished first book that never saw the light of day?
The first book that I wrote was Return of the Song, the first book in the Rockwater suite. But that was not my first book that was published.
I didn't think it was.
No, it wasn't. My first book that was published was The Christmas Portrait. And that came about when I sent my agent a copy of the Christmas story I had written for our family. I have a tradition that I write a Christmas story every year for our family Christmas gathering. And I had written that story. And I sent it to her as a Christmas card. And she called me the day she received it. And she said, Phyllis, this is your first book. How long would it take you to expand this book? And you've written short pieces and short stories, and you know, they're much more difficult to write because you don't have the luxury of time and space and lots of pages and lots of ways to develop your characters and develop the story. So I said, oh, that won't take long, especially if you think it might be my first piece to be published. And it was. She stuck with me, and um, that was the first one. And that kind of opened the door.
When you wrote the first, oh gosh, my mind is going blank on that series. I don't know
Rockwater.
what. Say it again.
Rockwater.
Rockwater. I keep going back to Longview. I don't know why. Rockwell Shoes. When you wrote, did you know you were going to write a series of books
Um,
on those characters?
no, I did not. But not when I started it. But once I had gotten into the book, I thought there's so much more to be told. Because my purpose, I think, in writing that book, or my interest in writing that book, was to show how someone who has had a great loss in her life and had to rebuild her life and her faith, and how important. And there's a scene in that book where she's talking to her older friend, Angel, and Angel was telling her that she needed to learn to dance again, to hear the real music again. And of course, Caroline had not been able to hear the real music for a while because of her hurt and her grief. But Angel told her, "You're doing the right thing because you're you're staying near the people who can hear the music, and you dance to their rhythms until you can hear it again." And I wanted to just tell a story about how someone who's had loss can rebuild, but it comes from relationships, to rebuild a life and to rebuild a hope for a future.
And that relationship between Angel and the judge, it's her husband,
Yes,
if they're an older couple
yes.
relative to Caroline, the heroine of the story. Did you know a couple like that? Is that based on any real people? Because also in Barhaven, Christmas at Barhaven, there is a couple like that from the
Well,
store, grocery. I think the grocery store where Anna
yeah,
works.
yes, yes, that couple who takes her in.
Yes.
Um, Jackie, I think growing up the way I did, family was so important to us. And I always gravitated toward my grandparents, especially my paternal grandmother. Um, and I've always had such respect for older people. I think they're just, these walking storybooks that I always found so fascinating, even when I was a kid in my growing up years. And the good Lord has always provided older women in my life. As I wouldn't say that they would tell you they were my mentors, but they were. I learned so much from their lives and from their life stories that I've just always loved older people. And now I is one.
There we are.
That's right.
But yeah, it's again, we have so much in common because I grew up, and I've said this on so many interviews where I've talked to people, but I grew up in the South, in South Carolina. I was in the era we didn't have air conditioning, we didn't necessarily have television, and the neighborhood would gather outside in the evening in chairs and sit and talk for an hour or more. Now, children could sit there, but they couldn't join in the conversation. This was adult conversation, not because of anything that was said, but the adults were talking. I love that. I learned about my family, my mother's family, my father's family, the neighbors' families. I just thrived on listening to those stories.
Yes.
And I think that's why I write the books I do, is because I want those preserved.
Yes.
Stories that I have, I want preserved for my grandchildren and my children, my grandchildren, etc. And I feel like today we are so caught up in machine, cell phones and all that sort of stuff. And it's rare when a family sits down to a meal together. It may be different at your house, but I know growing up, not growing up, but raising our boys, we emphasized that. But their friends would come over, they'd be like, "What are y'all doing?" let's go get something to eat, fast food, whatever. But I feel like that storytelling is being lost.
Yes.
And
Well,
that,
don't you think there's of course, growing up in the deep South, supper time was important in the house where I grew up. And I learned so much around that family supper table.
absolutely.
And when all of those feet were under that same table, there were all kinds of stories, going around that table. And I'm like you, I don't see much of that anymore. Even if the family's in the same room, they're texting each other across the room rather than having a conversation. And I fear that these kids that are growing up are not going to know how to have a conversation. And I don't know what that does about relationships and sweet and long-term kinds of relationships.
Well, my grandchildren who live here in Perry came over the other day, and you know, my wife said, what do y'all want for lunch? I'll fix, we'll just pick up Chick-fil-A,
Yeah.
you know, and we said, okay, but we're gonna sit in the dining room, and even if we just put the Chick-fil-A out there, we're gonna sit in the dining room, and we sat there for over 2 hours.
Yeah.
We got great Christmas gifts. I'm not saying that was one of the best gifts I got.
Yeah.
Having that focus time. And again, it grieves me that I think we're losing that. That's why when in your books, in Christmas at Bar Harbor, which was the latest book, so I'll focus on that. There is that mealtime emphasis.
Yes. Because I think it's so important. I think it's critical for family relationships and for children to learn how to talk. And then the mother there in the story is teaching her youngest child, Riley, how to
Yes.
sit still at the table and how to use his napkin and just good manners that we were
I,
taught when we were growing up.
but Phyllis, that's one thing. When I read about Barhaven and I read about the locale in your other books, do you think those places still exist? But a Barhaven, could I drive somewhere and be in a Barhaven?
I would like to think you could, but honestly, I don't know. It was just it was a place I would want to go to, and I
Yes.
created. Yes.
I felt like it was almost Brigadoon, a magical place that appears and then it
Well,
goes away.
if you notice on the book cover, let's see, I've got the book right here. There's a little sign as you're coming into town where it says, "Welcome to Bar Haven," where everyone can.
Count. That stuck in my mind from the time I got the book. And
Well,
it does. And those are the nicest people in that town. I mean, they are. They're people that you think, oh, I want to know them. I want to meet with them. I want to share my time with them.
well, I'm glad I created characters that you wanted to spend time with.
Oh, all of your characters I like spending time with. But I'm going to go back. I asked you if the judge and Angel were based on anybody true. Is every time I read, the Rock Water series. Yeah, right. Oh my gosh, I'm getting better. I think of you and Bill. I mean, Caroline plays the piano. Bill has so many talent. I mean, the male lead in the series has so many talent. And I think about you and Bill, and I think, I wonder how much Phyllis brought out of herself.
Do you know how many times I've been asked that question? Because so many of my
I'm
friends,
not unique.
well, you're just Caroline. And I say, well, no, I'm not. But, certainly just, I think all writers write a little bit of themselves into just about every character. You're going to find a little bit of me and Sam. You're going to find a little bit of me and Ned and Fred. And you're going to, you're just,
Talk about two great characters.
oh, I love Ned and Fred.
Oh, if y'all haven't read the Rockwater series, read it just for Ned and Fred, and then there, of course, there are all these other characters that play in and out too. And I always wonder, I think, oh my gosh, how's Phyllis going to get them involved? Because they're in two different
Oh,
locales.
yes,
And I'm
yes.
sure that's an effort to get that done.
Well, it just kind of is a natural. I mean, they had relationships, and it was rather natural. But we write about what we know. Well, I'm a classically trained musician, and I'm a Southern cook. So there's no way that I can write that those kinds of things are not included. My editor, when she was editing Christmas at Gray Sage, of course, I took a real trip with Gray Sage and went out to one of my favorite places in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And she called me one day, and that's one thing, you never want to hear get a call from your editor because that usually means, uh-oh. But
Feeling,
the
yes.
first thing she said was, Phyllis, I don't think I can do this. And I thought I had done a pretty good job with the book. She said, all I can think about is food. I turn every page and it makes me so hungry. But, I learned a whole lot about Southwest cuisine and I incorporated that into the book. And oh, I got to try all those good recipes. And, a lot of my books will have a recipe or two in the back.
Mm-hmm.
One that was particularly, oh, well, it was served more than once or twice in the book. So I would put the recipe in the book. But that's part of who I am, and that's
That's
how
just,
I like
yeah,
that.
yeah, I can agree with your agent. I've read it. I think Angel does a lot of cooking too. In
Yes. Well, she has a cook
she has
that
a cook.
but she likes to cook too, Angel. By the way, that I've had numerous readers. I got an email one day from someone like you do. I never knew this lady, but she wrote me on my website and she said, "Oh, please don't kill off Sam and Angel." And I thought, oh my goodness. And then she went on to say, I wish you would write their story, write their backstory.
Oh, wouldn't that be something?
Well, I'm seriously considering that, when you write a historical novel, which would take me out of the contemporary into 50, 60 years ago, to be authentic with that, and that would require a lot of time and research. But I'm thinking about it maybe one of these days.
You at one time, you and Bill ran a TV station, not station per se, but
It was a cable programming service, a
that's
national, yes.
yeah. I keep thinking that the Rockwater series of books would make just this wonderful TV series. Have you thought about that?
Oh, of course I've thought about that. That's not a real easy thing to do,
I
but
know.
I have been in conversation with a producer that used to produce the Hallmark Hall of Fame movies.
I loved Hallmark Hall of Fame. When they
Yeah,
got rid of it, I
yeah.
it's there, and I can't think front of the room, front of the class. I don't know if you remember that Hallmark Hall of Fame, but it was about the teacher, young male, who wanted to teach school, but he had the uh, condition that made you speak with, not censor your language.
Oh, yes.
And
Tur
can't
Tourette syndrome or something like that.
something
Yeah.
like that. But he's from Georgia, and I know him. And they made that movie out of his life, and it was fantastic. And I got to know I can't think of her name now, but the lady who was involved, because they did a lot of Terry McKay, who is a Georgia writer. They did a lot of his books, and they were just great, great. And then suddenly they began to be more commercial and not so great. And then they were gone.
Well, um, I don't think I could write a book that someone gave me the directions to write, all the parameters and the length and how many characters
Yeah,
and
that would be hard.
the one obligatory kiss right at the end of the movie.
Yeah.
Just I don't I'm too old, Jackie, and the creative process is too important to me to
Yeah, but I've got a feeling that's been your way for most of your life, that you know what you want to say and what how you want to say it.
yep.
But all right, tell me this idea you're percolating on with the Rockwater series.
Well, my editor, and I've had lots of people to request this. When are you going to write a sequel to Christmas at Gray Sage? And that's the one I'm getting ready to start. Right now, I'm working on another nonfiction work that hopefully I'll be done with it here in another couple of months. I've only done that once. I wrote a one, it's entitled Sacred Sense. And I just felt a desire to do a Sacred Sense too. So I'm working on that right now. In fact, your book inspired me to continue to do that, to write our little vignettes from our lives and draw some kind of truth from it. So I'm that's my first book this year, but also that percolating back there is another story that would take us back to Grace Sage and those wonderful characters. I love those characters.
Let me ask you this. I'm switching a little bit on you, but
It's
one of
okay.
the things that I enjoy so much, and you mentioned getting emails from people saying, "Don't kill off Sam and Angel," and one. I have the greatest group of people who write to me, and I had heard all kind of when I got involved with YouTube and everything. I'd heard all these horror stories about prepare yourself; they will take you apart, etc. And I have found this community of people that I just adore them. Uh, I love hearing from them. I love their comments. I love. They'll say you're the grandfather I never had. That type of thing. It's been such a positive experience for me. I hope it's been for you.
It has, very much so. And that, it does not take much of that to encourage us
No,
going. But oh my goodness, how I mean, it'll make my day to open my computer and here's an email from somebody in Sioux Falls, um, who when
further.
is the next book coming out? I've been waiting, kind of thing, or with a comment about something that they had read, or um, and I did get a number of emails after Return of the Song about people who had been grieving
Mhm.
and who were really encouraged by that book. Now that's enough to encourage me and keep that flame going, for months to keep me working. That it is helpful to people.
Absolutely. You have a fan named Monica Gabriel,
Oh, I
and
love her. And we've never met or had a
and
conversation.
she has kind of come over and shared, her comments to me on my stuff. I love Monica.
Yes.
And she is your biggest fan. I mean, she loves you and everything you write. And yeah,
Well, I love her too. I think we're kindred spirits, kind of like you and I are, coming from the South. And oh, she's a good writer herself. I've tried to encourage her to continue her writing and her blogging.
well, we're running out of time, but I want to say this. Uh, you and well, I was one of many that you gathered together for a book of inspirational stories.
Yes.
And I think you wanted me to do three. I think it was three.
Two.
Two.
Everybody did
Two.
two.
Yeah. And that was one of the best shared events of my life
Oh,
because
Jackie,
I
that
read the stories that the other, you wrote, Bill wrote, other people wrote, and it was just, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm in the company of these people and etc.
well, we felt the same way about being in company with people like you. And when actually this was Bill's idea. And what most people don't know is that um, Bill has, we've been dealing with cancer, serious cancer, for the last 5 years, and we pretty much had to stick close to home. He's doing well now, and God has been good, and we're so grateful for that. Um, but Bill has always lived by this principle of redeeming the time. Whatever time you have, even if it's a 30-minute break in something, or the gravy years, as he says he's living now, you redeem that time. And he, during one of our early morning quiet times, devotional times, he said, Phyllis, I've been thinking, we have some just pretty marvelous friends, and we do, as you could tell from the other
Yes,
people in
yes. Let me
the
tell you,
book,
yes.
amazing friends. And we began to list them. And we thought, oh my goodness, we knew God had blessed us richly with wonderful friends, but when you start to list them and think about what they could contribute to this project, it was a wonderful, wonderful project of people describing and writing about their defining moments in their lives. Because, life is lived,
Which is the name of the book, right?
yes, defining moments.
Yeah.
Life is lived very fluidly, but we don't remember life that way. We remember life in moments,
Right.
as you did in your latest book. Those moments, and sometimes those moments can change the whole trajectory of your life. Sometimes they just are meaningful moments. But oh, that was a great project. And we raised a few $1,000s for every bit of that. Everybody contributed their stories. Bill and I contributed the rest, and um,
It was a great project. Just
several
it's
thousand
still
dollars.
available, I'm sure, so people can
Yes.
get it.
And it's the gift that keeps giving. All proceeds go to Samaritan's Purse for their efforts, relief efforts around the world.
They're needed now more than ever.
Yes.
But let me close on this.
Okay.
I, I've told the story again many times, but recently I was in Atlanta for the Atlanta Mercer Authors Luncheon. And one of the speakers was a man named James Moss III. And he is a pastor at a church in Chicago. And he was just a tremendous speaker. But he somehow they had a breakfast, and I got seated next to him, and he began to ask me about my career and I was telling him different things about how I got called up to work for the Huffington Post in Perry, Georgia, which was ridiculous. Nobody goes to that, does that. And then how my YouTube channel, blew up, and how I got the book written, all those things. And I was just telling him one instant after another, and I kept saying, and I didn't plan any of it. I just didn't plan it. It just came. And he said, it seems to me, my friend, that your life has been a series of sacred serendipities.
Yes.
And Phyllis, you're a sacred serendipity to me.
Oh, thank you, my friend. I really appreciate that.
I sincerely mean it. I've enjoyed your books. I've loved them, but the friendship that grew out of it, that's the key part. That's the key part.
Well, Jackie, one of these days,
One of these days,
I'm going to surprise you.
just
We're going to make a trip to Georgia, and I'm just going to drive right up that highway from Cairo, and you and I we're going to have lunch or dinner, and
whatever.
we're going to tell stories.
Rich story. But this has been great. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Well, thank you for the opportunity, my friend, and God bless you richly in what you're doing and trying to spread some hope and light yourself.
God bless you. But this has been Jackie K. Cooper here with Phyllis Clark Nichols. Thank you for tuning in.